Good morning. My name is Marin Turner, and I'm the State Director for AARP Kansas. Welcome to the special edition of Facebook Live. We have with us again today Dr. Marci Nielsen, who is Governor Kelly's Chief Advisor for COVID-19. She's also an expert on public health, and so we're very fortunate to have her here today to answer some questions. So, good morning, Marci.
So nice to be with you, Marin.
Nice to have you again. Let's just start with some good news. I saw in the Topeka Capital Journal not too long ago some good news about Kansas being in the top 10 when it comes to getting vaccines into the arms of seniors. What do you attribute that to? Just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we are thrilled that we're doing quite well in Kansas. I attribute it to everyone's hard work in public health and our healthcare providers who have been so focused on trying to get, as we like to say, shots into arms. I think folks may recall there at the beginning of the vaccination process, there were some data lag issues. So we were struggling a bit to have the data reflect the reality. We've been working very closely, on a one-on-one basis with some providers who have had issues with the data system. So Lots of kudos to those folks. And then kudos to Kansans who have prioritized getting vaccinated. And I just can't stress enough how important it is for everyone to tell their family and their friends and their colleagues, I got vaccinated. It went fine. Maybe you had a sore arm, but it turns out that the data tells us that one of the most influential things that impact particularly young folks is talking to their friends. One of the things that's particularly impactful for older folks, so folks over the age of 50, is talking to their physicians. So it's important to do both.
Yeah, that is just so, that's fabulous news. And as you said, Kansans are stepping up to the plate. So that's really good. So, we've been hearing some things in the news about Johnson and Johnson and some concerns there. Could you just talk a little bit about what's going on with that particular vaccine?
Yeah, so the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, just to remind folks, is the one-shot vaccine. So it's a very important tool in our arsenal against COVID. There were some glitches in the manufacturing process that made the news, but what has really captured, I think, everyone's attention is that the CDC and the FDA put a pause on the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to explore what was a potential side effect that was very serious in a certain demographic of younger women, and in particular blood clots that could be very, very serious. The details I'm happy to talk about. The good news is what this tells us is that the safety system in the United States works. We found that that side effect in just 6 cases out of almost 7 million people who had received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So it is an extremely rare case, but that doesn't mean that for that population of individuals, again, younger women, that we don't need to be very mindful of how the vaccine is used. When you compare the risk, what we are saying is it is more risky to be on, for example, birth control pills, or it's more risky to be a smoker. There are a lot of things that put us at risk for blood clots. So just to contextualize it a bit, we are expecting the FDA here in pretty short order to take the pause back off of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as they've looked at all the data. But what we suspect they will do is add some cautionary language to say, if you are in this risk group, you just need to know that we've seen some risk for blood clots. They may even restrict it to certain categories of individuals. But I've been on some calls this week, for example, with Dr. Tony Fauci, who is expecting the pause to be lifted.
Okay, so it sounds like this was a problem for a very small group of people, but everybody's taking it seriously. But still, overall, people can feel very comfortable and know that the vaccines are safe. In terms of
exactly
Moderna
right.
and Pfizer, but they are safe.
They are safe, and they go through an incredibly rigorous safety process as they're evaluated in clinical trials. And so, yes, I think it's really important to emphasize the safety. I think it's also important to emphasize that folks have concerns about side effects, and that's normal. So side effects from the flu shot, for example, make people feel kind of crappy for a day or two. We see the same thing with side effects for some people for the COVID vaccine, but that's all very normal. So rest assured, this vaccine operates much like other vaccines that are out there, and the FDA and the CDC were taking every precaution, just double checking whether this blood clot, this rare event, should be evaluated, and we'll learn more this week.
So the vaccines are safe, and certainly, AARP and other groups have been getting information out there to people so that they can make informed decisions. But, overall, what would you say is the rate of getting vaccines and arms in Kansas in general? We talked about how we're in the top 10 for older people, but overall, what would you say? Where would you say that we stand?
Yeah, we are about 40% of the overall population getting at least one shot. But when you look at just the population that's eligible, so people over the age of 16, we're at about half. So we're right there, kind of in the middle of the states in terms of ranking. We're doing quite well when it comes to stopping the spread of the virus. We're very low for hospitalizations, for deaths. So we're doing a good job of taking care of people. But really, it's about all of us in this together. This only works when everyone is taking this seriously, and in Kansas, we clearly are.
Good. We know that more and more people are stepping up and getting the vaccine, but I read in the Wichita Eagle this morning that there was a cluster problem in a nursing home, possibly because someone was not vaccinated. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on in nursing homes?
Yes, it's very important for folks to realize that nursing homes were one of the first places that the CDC and the state of Kansas prioritized vaccinations. They certainly wanted residents to get vaccinated, but we also wanted to provide vaccines to workers, and very important that for them, for the safety of the folks that they take care of, to get vaccinated. This was a case, as you point out, in Wichita, and as we've seen in a few other cases around the country, where a healthcare worker was not vaccinated. They went into a population, taking care of a population of mostly vaccinated folks, and there were some folks who wound up testing positive. In other words, the vaccine works, and it prevented them from becoming seriously ill if they were vaccinated. But what we found for those who weren't vaccinated, actually they got quite sick. Again, emphasizing the importance of everyone getting vaccinated. Whether you are at the highest risk, so we know people who live in nursing homes are at high risk. Maybe that healthcare worker didn't think that they themselves were necessarily at risk, but they did put all these other people at risk because they weren't vaccinated. That's why I keep coming back to the importance of recognizing the responsibility we have to one another.
So yeah, you make a really good point. It's not just about protecting yourself, but protecting other people, particularly if you're working with a very vulnerable population like we see in nursing homes. So that's one example of a cluster. Are there any other clusters that you can speak about across Kansas that viewers need to know about?
Well, all of the clusters are listed on the KDHE website. We
Okay.
have, I think, done a beautiful job at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, putting as much data as we possibly can in the public space. We have data by county, by race and ethnicity, by age, gender, etc. So in terms of other outbreaks, we pay attention very closely to outbreaks. The folks at what we call the incident command system go through every outbreak that's happening across the state and talk about it, talk about whether there are potential variants of the virus involved, and then quickly share information with one another, but work very much in partnership with local public health. I know there have been some cases in some jails and prison systems, not unlike the nursing home. It's a congregate setting where people are at high risk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, you're absolutely right. And so you mentioned the KDHE website, but then we're also scrolling information at the bottom of the screen for how people can get onto that website or onto the kansasvaccine.gov website, which is part of KDHE. There's also a toll-free number people can call if they want more information. So I know that recently the governor launched an equity task force, and it seems like that's up and going. Can you just talk a little bit about what they're charged with and anything else we should know about this equity task force?
Yeah, thank you for asking. We were very excited to get this launched. We have been focused on this issue for some time, that we are aware that there are some populations of individuals who are at higher risk for COVID, both for illness and as well as death. That tends to be in very specific categories that we call socially vulnerable groups.
Oh, okay.
So we have mapped out, using data from the CDC, all of the socially vulnerable, what we call the socially vulnerable index, those counties that really need special attention. And we're looking in particular, when we talk about equity, at social vulnerability. We're also looking at communities of color, where we have seen, both in Kansas but across the country, higher rates of death and illness. And we really want to promote vaccination for those populations. We start with the data, and when you look at sort of state best practices, you're really focused on three things. First, you've got to have accurate data. We've got to know where vaccinations are taking place and in which populations, so that we can micro-target our efforts. Secondly, we've got to know what the best way is to get vaccines to those populations. Maybe a mass vaccination site that we do during the middle of the week isn't convenient for people. Maybe we need to have mass vaccination sites in the evenings and on weekends. But what we are seeing now is we really need to rely on our healthcare providers in primary care. People feel better when they can talk to their doctor or their nurse practitioner. And so how can we at the state ensure that vaccinations are going to those family physicians and we're able to get shots in arms? So that's the supply issue that we talk about in the equity task force. And then finally, the demand. And this is where the task force work, I think, is going to be really important. And that is, we are now at a place where we've got enough vaccine in Kansas. Anyone in Kansas can find a vaccine now, right? There was a shortage for many months, but the vaccine is in general available or quickly becoming available. But we have folks who have some concerns about the vaccine, and they have very specific concerns depending on their cultural background or misinformation that they've heard. So what we want this task force to help us with is help us better understand what those barriers are and motivate people to get vaccinated, and help us do that outreach in your community. So right now we've got 45 individuals from across the state who are helping us. They come from every sector and every kind of walk of life, and we're asking them, help us better understand how we can serve Kansas by figuring out where we need to have a better supply of vaccine, but also how we can work with them to create demand for those individuals who still have concerns about getting vaccinated.
I just think that's excellent to have this kind of task force where, ordinary Kansans can come together and talk about, answering some of the questions that you just had. What can we do to make sure that people understand the vaccine is safe and where they can get it and things like that. So I think that's great. And so congratulations on launching that. There is a lot of information in the news, especially following some discussions at the legislature about vaccine passports. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and where the governor and the legislature stand on that?
You bet. So the concept of a vaccine passport isn't all that different from the cards that they give you when you've been vaccinated. They're little white cards that come from the CDC. But the concept of a vaccine passport is we could have that in a phone app, for example. And while on its face, that seems fairly benign, where the concern comes in is how we use that information. Certainly, we want that information to be private and secure, but also would that passport prevent people from getting to access different venues or services? So there's some concern about equity when you start thinking about passports and who gets to use them, how they're used. What we know at this point is that the federal government, the Biden administration, is saying they are not going to create a federal passport, that they really want to leave that to the private sector to figure out the best way, for example, to decide who gets on an airplane. We know that there are some countries that require you to be vaccinated. And this was pre-COVID, right? There are countries that require vaccination before you can go through customs for yellow fever, for example. In the state of Kansas, we not to my knowledge, we've not had a rigorous debate about the topic, but I think that's largely because there's general agreement that we aren't interested in having government oversee its own passport, so to speak. And so Governor Kelly has said she's just not interested at this time. I think the legislature would probably be in agreement. We know there are a handful of states that are actually outlawing passports. We know there are also a handful of states that are developing passports. So I think Kansas is stepping back given our sort of what do I want to say? Our support for private sector initiatives to manage complex issues like that.
Thank you for that explanation, because, we had heard some questions about what is the passport and where does Kansas stand, because, it is in the news. As you said, there are some states that are, outlawing it, and there are some states considering it. And so, it's just good to have that information about Kansas. Can you tell us a little bit about any variants that have arisen, and whether or not the vaccines are still very effective for those? And do you foresee any boosters, say, for example, if the current vaccines are not able to cover these variants?
Yes, so variants are something that we pay a lot of attention to and are concerned about, because we are seeing them all over the United States, to include in Kansas. What we know today is that the vaccines that are currently on the market appear to be pretty successful at stopping the variants, as well as sort of the original coronavirus, if you will. But it could be possible that we'll need boosters, or we'll need tweaks in the vaccine as certain variants become more prevalent in the country. At this point, I just think folks should take some solace in knowing scientists are tracking this so very carefully, and one of the benefits of both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine, because they're what's called mRNA vaccines, they can very easily be tweaked in a matter of weeks, not months. So should there be variants that become problematic, we've got tools in our arsenal to deal with them. Having said that, part of the challenge in talking to people about vaccination and encouraging those who have yet to get vaccinated is explaining that the variants tend to spread very quickly. And so we want to encourage people to get vaccinated as soon as possible. The longer we have a population that's kind of ambivalent or is taking a wait and see approach, the greater the potential for variants to spread. And if at some point we have a variant that in fact doesn't, the current vaccines don't protect us against, then we're going to have a whole host of new issues to contend with.
No.
So speed matters. It really does.
Yeah, we don't want to see these new issues pop up. We don't. We want to go back to whatever our new normal is going to be. We want to get back there soon. So as usual, Marci, you are a wealth of great information. And for our viewers who would like even more information, they are welcome to access the information that is scrolling at the bottom of the screen at www.kansasvaccine.gov or 866-534-3463. Anything else you want to add before we close out today?
Well, I know I talk about this a lot, Marin, but I just want folks to understand that the anxiety and the social isolation, and for some people depression that has come with almost the trauma of this pandemic is real. And I just so want to encourage people who are struggling themselves to reach out and get help and find resources, because we really are all in this together. I was just watching this morning a documentary that was filmed in Kansas City called The Hidden Pandemic, and it's about our mental health stresses, not as a result of the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, we certainly struggled with delivery of mental health services, and post-pandemic, it's becoming even more challenging. So just would continue to emphasize the importance of people taking care of themselves, recognizing they're not alone, and encouraging them to reach out to their healthcare provider if they have concerns about their health or the health of a loved one.
Very good advice. Again, it's been a pleasure to have with us today Dr. Marci Nielsen, who is Governor Kelly's Chief COVID Advisor. I also invite our viewers to check out www.aarp.org/KS, as AARP has a wealth of information as well on our website. And we encourage you to look at that daily, because we update it. And if you have any questions for us, call us at 866-448-3619. Again, thank you all for being with us today. And we'll see you again next time, Marci. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much, Maren. Great to see you.
Good to see you.